This is Don't Get Me Started. This is a conversation about advertising. And here is your host, freelance creative director and creative circus department head, Dan Balser.
Yes, welcome back to another episode of the podcast in the library at the Creative Circus with Erwin Federizo, as you knew, because it says it right there on your file, on your device, or on your computer as you listen to this. And before we start, let me just say, thank you so much for listening to this. I've been doing this for 12 and a half years, and every now and then I'll hear that someone heard something and it meant something to somebody, and it makes me feel good. I appreciate that. I wouldn't still be doing it if it weren't for you guys out there listening. And let me know what you think of this episode and any past episode. I'm open to feedback. And you can also follow the show on Facebook and see pictures and links and all that stuff at facebook.com/DGMS podcast. Erwin is he used to be an art director. I think he probably sort of still wishes he was just an art director. I think there are days when Erwin wakes up and says, can't I just mess with type today? Can't I just sit at my computer and just make something cool and go home and hang out with the kids? But Erwin is now Global Executive Creative Director at Vans. Global means that he works on the Vans brand and helps it reach other markets. And he is also in charge of Earth. He runs the planet because he's Global Executive Creative Director of Earth, working at Vans.
That's right.
Wouldn't that be cool?
That's right. It's a huge. The job description was at least 6 pages.
Right. What would the Global Executive Creative Director of Earth even do? Probably first thing he'd do is say, let's cool this country, this world. See, that was a slip. I said cool the country down. I meant cool the world down. Right. So Erwin went to school at Art Center, College of Design. He graduated as a designer. He worked at a bunch of cool places, and we know a lot of the same people. He was for about a year at TBWA Chiat Day. He worked at a place called the Ballpark. I want to know what that is. I don't know what the Ballpark is. You want to do that now?
The first to sort of scratch your head at that one. That was actually my second official job out of Art Center, but my first sort of real job in advertising. It was 3 gentlemen, and they sort of came from Seiniger Advertising. Seiniger Advertising in LA was, at the time, they were doing a lot of sort of broadcast sort of promotions for Fox Sports. They were doing a lot of sort of promotional work for ESPN. So the stuff that ESPN would do with White and Kennedy, there was additional work, obviously, in sort of like the local markets.
Right. Oh, cool.
These guys were responsible for that.
Oh, it's fun stuff.
Yeah, and the accounts were sports driven. So obviously, with the name, the Ballpark. Yeah. You would imagine the roster of clients being TVG, which was the horse racing network, ESPN, which we did some broadcast promo for ESPN, Fox Sports at a time. We did Upper Deck trading cards, which was really cool.
That's really cool.
And the like. So if you'd imagine that sort of the space, it was heavy, and Anaheim Angels of baseball. That was sort of their name before they turned into Los Angeles.
You know what they were before that, of course.
They were
California Angels.
California Angels, that's right, yeah.
When I lived in LA, they were the California Angels.
California Angels, that's right.
So you always into sports? I mean, you obviously gravitated towards articulating.
I think it was really just a sort of the zone that I was very familiar with and comfortable and had a sort of passion for. Yeah, and cool. It's weird. It's really weird because now you're asking me, Dan, to sort of reflect back a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of it.
All the way back to the Ballpark, and I think at the time it just sort of was the available job. It's the company that decided to hire me.
Oh, that's interesting.
I didn't sort of like say, I didn't craft my book, nor did I sort of like have this intent coming out of school to work on sports advertising.
Right. I find that really interesting because I've often talked about this, not sure on the podcast, but when I got out of school, I went to Ogilvy, New York, worked on some really big brands, and it was good. But my second job, where I started working on B2B stuff, it kind of played into sort of the kind of writer that I became, because I really just enjoyed, and this is very specific, but I just enjoyed writing about complicated things and making them simple. And like, did I know that as a student? Did I want that when I got out of school? No, it's just kind of where I went, and it worked for me, and it kind of has sustained me. So that's kind of cool. So from the Ballpark, you were at Deutsch for a year, freelance, and then Wong Duty for a year. Yep. 180 LA for 4.5 years.
Yeah. Is that considered long in sort of the as a sort of a tenure at a specific agency?
That's a question for you.
It's a great question.
Yeah, sure it is.
It felt like the time-wise, it felt like the experience went by really quick.
Right. I know.
4 years at
Sounds
the
like a long
time. Looking at the time, I was like, wow, I spent the last 4 years of my career here, which is insane if you think about, sort of like maybe sort of like a generation before, where sort of like they were like tenured at, like Ogilvy folks were like Ogilvy folks,
25
or
years,
Leo
right.
Burnett folks were
Right.
Leo Burnett folks, and that, so like the idea of sort of moving around was the only way you could sort of build your portfolio and have a lot of sort of flexibility in touching different types of clients. And that
interesting.
wasn't sort of important to me at the time. I didn't really know it. I just sort of like, maybe it's sort of the ADD kicking in a little bit of like, well, like, I'll write this for as long as I can, or feel like it, or, like I'm still passionate to go to the office.
Right.
And if something else sort of comes, down the road, I'll take that.
How much were you on at 180? How many different things?
Sort of like would be in tandem, like an Adidas and Sony US Electronics. So like two clients at a time.
They kept you allowed you to scratch your itch enough.
Yeah.
And the thing about 4 years, and I've said this many times, that when you're 20 something, 4 years is a long time, because that's like a whole college career.
Right.
But now you're a grown up, and 4 years is just like one chapter in your whole career. So it's not that long in the big picture.
Yeah. It's always weird to me, and I always think it's funny when I see people, especially in the leadership, the higher ends and the more sort of senior parts of their careers, and there'll be sort of a press release, there'll be business cards printed, there'll be a full,
Whole bio summary.
Yeah, there'll be sort of an acclimation process.
Right.
There'll be an introduction to the clients. And then you find out that they leave, 6 months later, and like, they went through all that crap.
Right.
And then they're not even there anymore.
Right.
It just seemed weird to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, I always like, I'm trying to be very cognizant of the places that I step into next, because I just don't like that idea of like spending all this time and equity, and whether it be sort of on my end or someone else's end, is like, you just put someone through, sort of a whole sort of task and experience of getting you acclimated into this position, and you're going to sit in it for,
that's weird. It's
for a couple days.
Who didn't know what they were getting into in that scenario either? It's like, was it the person who went there because of the name on the door? Was it the agency that thought they were getting something? I don't know. That's all. That I always scratch my head when someone doesn't stay somewhere for a year or two.
Right.
So I want to move on to the rest of your career, but I want to ask you a question about 180. So you were there for long enough to learn stuff. What do you think you took away from it as either an art director, a creative director, or just a person? What did you learn that informed you at your move to Wieden & Kennedy, or what was the thing at that section? What do you think the sort of moral of that story was?
Well, I think depending on the clients that I had the opportunity to touch, I think that's where the art direction expertise and the craft really started ramping up for me personally.
Were you a good designer out of school?
I like to say that I had a really sort of good feel for the space.
That makes so. Then professionally, how did that evolve, or what built on your background at the job?
So as you can imagine, when you're going in and you're going to sell some work to your creative director, they are going to react to the concept. They're going to react to the copy, and then they're going to also, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, they're going to definitely react viscerally to the art direction. And if you have a really kick-ass suite of assets and sort of visual, sort of like a toolkit that sort of help you articulate an idea, the better off you are. And I always felt that I was pretty good at that. It's like my swipe folder, as I call it, was just a hot mess of everything that I thought was cool.
You still do that?
I still do that.
Yeah, it's great.
I still do that. I mean, obviously now with whether it's Pinterest or Design Inspiration, I feel there's
it's automated.
There's automation now, and I would always ask art directors, like, let me see your swipe folder. Let me see your swipe folder, because it's important to you. Because that would basically be the place you would go to in your brain, that top shelf where you'd sort of reach back for inspiration, for direction.
Well, I said this to you earlier. Yeah. For me, as a writer, the first thing people see the words before they read the words.
Right.
They're already you're informed before you start what that voice is going to be. And when I worked on IBM at Ogilvy, I had my partners send me a layout and the font so I could write lines in that typeface because it's acting in a way.
Right.
And you have to develop that character, and then you're showing kind of a character development of that brand through that work.
Right. And it's funny enough, there was I remember there were sort of these movements or trends in type, especially in advertising. You could almost pick up a CA magazine from the late 90s or early 2000s, and you can sort of say, oh, that sort of like crack house or those sort of like distressed typefaces really sort of played a significant part in like a very significant like sort of period in advertising. And then sort of people move on to the next trends of handwritten type and so on and so forth. All that stuff, I feel like if you've got a really good sense of of what the voice needs to say, then there's a typeface for it. There's a way to sort of express it that's random and a mistake. And then there's a real true intent to design and pick a typeface that's appropriate to the voice that the message that you're trying to get across. And I think to your point is like if you were going to write sort of anarchist manifesto, you imagine that is going to feel and look a certain way. Whatever you have in your head, whatever you're sort of conjured up, I imagine it's pretty similar to mine. But those types of things should help sort of be very supportive of that voice.
I also love, and
we're getting really philosophical here.
No, this is where the rubber meets. This is where the rubber meets the communication road, in my opinion. But I also will give this example to classes, and I apologize to listeners who've heard me say this. I also think if you have an aggressive message, like if the headline's "fuck you," isn't it really cool in a light script?
Oh yeah.
I mean, because the tension between the look and the voice is also really powerful, and I think that anarchist could be a sort of a messy type, but it could also be something extremely traditional.
Right.
Also to validate the movement of the anarchy too. like let's guess what? Anarchy is the establishment now, right? This is what typography does, and I think that's something that people don't consider. Another point I think I wanted to make when you mentioned that when you come to these meetings with a suite and you understand the power of thinking these things through, is that it's a package now that someone can react to, and it's kind of easy to kill work that seems half baked. And when you see something packaged, it's like, oh. And I've had creative directors in my career who couldn't see what I was saying unless they saw it literally in front of them. So there's that homework will always pay off. Right.
So a lot of creative directors will need to sort of be able to point at something and react to it. Mm-hmm. And that requires a lot of labor on the side of the creative team that's going to be presenting the work.
Exactly. Right. So 180 taught you that.
I think, yes, definitely. I think that was the place where I really started feeling like I was able to sort of exercise the skills of just identifying my toolkit.
That's cool.
And my toolkit was my swipe folder is like the suite of type that I always used. And the sort of visual sort of lexicon of in that time sports for Adidas, whether it be basketball or U.S. soccer, those things, I was just really good at sort of hoarding and collecting culture surrounding those clients.
Was there a leader there that you can point to as an inspiration or a mentor?
No, there's definitely. I worked.
Should have seen his face. Listeners missed his face. It was a great face.
There was. I mean, when I was working at 180 LA, it was just this amazing storm of creativity.
Was Amir Farhang there at all?
Amir Farhang was there, and then we partnered up on several projects together.
So fun. But
I mean, I couldn't tell you. There's just so many great people that sort of came out of that class, and if we had a reunion, I'd tell you we'd be able to sort of take over the advertising world.
Oh, that's so
There's
great.
A lot of great people, like from the sort of Gavin Miller and Grant Hollins and the Gavin Lesters of the world, and the Will Geltner. Obviously, like there's cool. I'm gonna and Ari Weiss. I'm gonna miss some folks, but I mean, there was definitely just your who's who at the time. Tom Hamling. And
Hi, Tom.
Obviously, there's just so many great people. Whether it be leadership or not, man, I learned so much from everybody, and it felt like we sort of had a run of the place.
That's really nice.
In a good way, and like I don't know if anyone sort of really really knew that maybe because of like the egos were down, that people were just kind of like making really cool shit and having fun doing it, and there was not a lot of thought around it, like the impact of the work that we were making. I thought we made some of the best work for that company at the time.
I love that. That's so cool. So then the move to Wieden and Kennedy in New York, and this is where things sort of ignited, I'd say. For listeners who don't know, it's on the Facebook page, but the Erwin was part of the group that won a Cannes Grand Prix for the Jeter Respect, and the story. I want to let you tell the story about that, but I'm gonna let you tell a story. And I'm gonna make my point, but tell how. So for those of you who don't know, there was a campaign for Nike that honored Derek Jeter's retiring and his number, and I want you to let listeners know kind of the genesis of that and where that came from.
Sure. Yeah. So my copywriting partner Eric Helene, at the time, who's still at Wieden Kennedy, New York right now, we were tasked to sort of take on this project. We were one of the senior teams, our director, copywriter seniors, on the Jordan brand, and the brief actually started off. I believe it sort of shifted from we want to do a big sort of training commercial for the brand, sort of like showing their new line of training gear, and it shifted to like, oh, here's a calendar moment where Derek Jeter, the longest tenured athlete sponsored by the Jordan brand, is retiring, and I believe that came from our planner. And so quickly in the last moment it shifted. So we sort of went away with sort of a training brief and a training campaign, and went like deeper into, and quickly we went deep quick into it felt like just like a couple nights worth of work, but we went deep into like, hey, let's do this reactive congratulatory ad for Derek Jeter. And so when we were working on it, we were just mining the internet for things that would inspire us to come up with this idea. How do we congratulate this baseball player of 20 years with the Yankees? And I just had such a hard time. I think both my partner Eric and I had such a hard time finding any sort of real
new fresh way, right?
Fresh way,
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
or even just Dan, the just something about him that we can really sort of latch onto and sort of rally around. I think we were just heading into Wieden Kennedy, New York had just redesigned their office space, and they were having a huge sort of like dinner and like party. They brought in Dan Wieden. They brought in a bunch of folks a bunch of the creative directors from all the offices around the world. And I think we're like in the middle of the party. And my creative directors at the time, Jim Lasser and Gary Vanzura, were like, hey, we need to figure this out because we need to put together a presentation. Like, fuck this party. We need to get to work. And I think it just sort of happened where things were sort of floating around in my head. Things were floating around in Eric's head. And the one thing that we sort of all agreed on is that like there was no dings and nothing bad in the press about Derek Jeter, and that everyone respected the guy. And, I think this is where my graphic design sort of instincts sort of kicked in, and I decided to sort of handwrite the word respect and take the S and flip it so that it reflected into the number 2, which is Derek Jeter's number. And that very single sort of moment, that single word, that single idea, I think was identified very quickly by the CDs. Yeah.
What about you? So you flipped the S, you put a 2 there. You're like, or were you like, yes? Well, what was your emotion?
No, the answer is like,
what were you thinking?
I'm shit. It's this could be a really shitty idea, and we want to sell something.
Let's just throw something up against the
exactly.
See what sticks. Okay.
Yeah, but like you don't really know, right? You don't say this is it. I got it.
Right.
No, there was none of that. It was just like, hey, how about this? And I think it was identified very quickly, and by 2 smart creative directors.
Well, they did then. They saw it.
They definitely saw it. They definitely saw it. They saw it, and they said, you know what? The simplicity of it it's resonated.
It's visually iconic too. I mean, look at all the things that Nike does that are they look so I don't know the word I'm thinking of, so basic.
Right.
Like the Flying Jordan, the swoosh. It's just, but it's timeless and resonant and meaningful when you look at it.
Right. And so from my perspective, you're right. Like my partner and I throw ideas out there, And we just sort of like, sometimes we throw an idea on the table and we just sort of like get ready to flinch.
Right. Right.
Because, like they're either going to love it or hate it. And they identified it and they're like, yeah, there's definitely something there. And I think because of the simplicity of it. And at the time you're just, you don't really sort of, it doesn't sink in until you start ideating against it. And when you start building executions, and that's when you're like, I think we got something pretty cool. So I
have a question.
Yeah.
And this is out of my pure ignorance because I haven't worked at Wieden & Kennedy yet.
Right, yet.
How
I know some people.
Dude, that's cool. Let's talk after. How much guidance / leadership partnership is there between the agency and that brand itself, the company itself? And the reason I'm asking is that as you were talking today about Vans, and we're going to get to Vans, we're not leaving Vans,
definitely.
In the closet. The way you articulate the truth of the pillars of the Vans brand reminded me so acutely of a conversation I had on this podcast with the woman who runs the fan engagement marketing for Atlanta United, the soccer team. She's so clear-minded on what the brand stands for and how it's executed in real life activations, fan engagement, whether it's in the real world or online. And she comes from Nike. She had worked and it's almost as if you and she and others have been awakened to a religion. I'm not saying this in any negative way. Right. It's a religion of being loyal to a truth of a brand. And that, I think, has been one of the strengths of everyone that I know who works on the Nike brand, everyone at Wieden & Kennedy. How much of that is coming from Nike? How much of that is coming from Wieden & Kennedy? How much of that is coming from the leadership creative teams on the ground? Like, where does that come from? And I don't know if you know it, but I assume that this is the thing you learned that you've taken with you.
Right.
And I may be completely wrong. I may be completely wrong.
I think, and I'm going to caveat this heavily. My opinion, my point of view on this is strictly mine, and I think I need to say that because I think there's a lot of points of views on how the chemistry in the success of both Nike and Wieden & Kennedy have come about. Mm-hmm. All I could tell you is if you're like me and you've sort of been a student of advertising and a student of successful brands, Nike being one of them, and Wieden & Kennedy, you realize that like they've already set you up on a sort of path to success simply by the breakthrough work that precedes the work that you are taking on, and so you are then sort of tasked to just sort of stay up to par if you can. Right. With that.
Well, no, that's not easy to do.
No, it's not easy. But so the studying behind it comes. What I believe it comes from, and Susan Hoffman said it best. From Wieden Portland, obviously, is you have to be able to like boil it down to a provocation that is going to make the audience react. Make me feel something, make me react to something, and you could see that you could use that, you could take that as a guideline, and you could sort of put it up against any piece of great Nike work, and believe that was the guiding force in a philosophy of coming up with a work that wins and that resonates, and wins awards and whatnot.
I will say, I think that Mike Byrne has that. Mike Byrne, the work for Dick's from Anomaly.
Oh my God, yeah, that stuff, yeah.
Dude, that you could fail 117 different ways doing ads for Dick's.
Yeah.
I've
worked on Dick's Sporting
Goods. It could just be so cliched. What?
I've worked on Dick's Sporting Goods, and when I saw that work, I was like, oh, that's what good Dick's Sporting Goods.
There you go, exactly. Yeah, but that's not necessarily the case when you get to Vans, right? I mean, is this, or you're taking this with you, what Susan said? I mean, this is something that you're feeling.
Oh yeah,
okay.
Definitely.
All right, okay.
Definitely. So that very simple sort of ask of a creative team or creative directors is to just put forth work that people can react to. Mm-hmm. I mean, that hasn't changed. I heard that from Susan, and it's resonated and been applied.
I'm going to give you a little bit more credit because I feel like you were talking about, and I'm going to hack it. You're going to have to help me through this, but you were talking about Van's basic ethos of being the encouragement of creativity,
Yes.
the self-expression.
Right.
And it's about the guy at the party who's not the front of the party. He's there, but he's on the side or she's on the side. Not necessarily not included, but doing their own thing. And the anthem video that you showed, that I'd love to be able to share with listeners on if I can.
It's definitely online, so maybe there's a link you could post for it.
I felt that. Do you feel that it's true? Do you feel that it's actually? I mean, do you feel that it's bought into across the board, something that can actually be articulated and define sort of what you? Am I defining it fairly? That it's encouragement and creativity. What else would you add to that?
Yeah, it's championing and enabling creative expression. If you could imagine that philosophy alone, which started as a business act of like a skateboarding kid, a teenager coming into the sneaker store at Vans and saying, "Hey, can I just buy the left shoe because it's being worn out from all the friction on the skateboard from ollieing." If that isn't enabling creative expression, like you're gonna wear, and I want that shoe to be a different color from the original one you sold me. So left shoe red, right shoe blue. Mm-hmm. No one was doing that at the time. Mm-hmm. So a brand being like, "Yeah, we'll sell you just one."
Yeah,
cool. If that's the genesis, and if that's the symbol of being an icon of creative expression, I think that's it. That is the story that sort of is the catalyst for everything else we do for the brand.
Right. So if you keep that in your mind, when you evaluate work at the executive creative director level, and you're overseeing, I think you said 5 different sort of silos of creative. Yeah. So they're coming to you as, in a way, I'm assuming to make sure, are we on brand, right? Is that the filter you look at it through objectively? Is that how you're looking at it?
I mean, I have so many sort of weird checkpoints in my head from that, of course, being one of them, and probably the most important one is like, if I show this and if I share this with a group of kids, are they going to be inspired by it? Are they going to react to it? I mean, that's a little bit of the Susan Hoffman there, is like, show me something that I can react to, positive or negative.
You ever run it by your boys?
Yeah, I mean, I'll run it by the boys, and I'll just have really sort of like strong bullshit filter in my head.
You have 2 sons.
Yeah,
they don't have to be retrofitted with bullshit filters.
No, I mean, everything that comes out of my mouth is embarrassing to them.
Everything.
Yeah,
everything, dude. I feel your pain, man.
Except for the Van stuff. If I show them stuff, they'll actually like it's the one thing that's sort of keeping me alive in their books right now. Is like, okay, he might still be a little bit cool.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, so listener, I know there's 2 of you out there thinking right now, is he going to talk about why he left an agency to go work in house?
Good.
Talk about that, because we've had a couple of in-house folks on the show, but I'm curious from your perspective what it was that lured you into working on one brand.
Right. So. Funny enough, I have absolutely no reason why I left White & Kennedy, New York. It's just a spectacular and amazing experience. Mm-hmm. And people are like, "You're an idiot for leaving," and I was like, "Yeah, you're right. I am an idiot." The thing that sort of I remember feeling was like, I think it's time to move on. I feel very comfortable here. And you could take that in a lot of different ways, good and bad, because like no one wants to sort of like feel comfortable at a place. You want to sort of continue to push and challenge yourself. There was a little bit of that, but ultimately I knew I was going to make my way back to the West Coast and back to California. I just knew that I was going to have a hard time finding a full-time job. So I ended up quitting, and I tell Carl Lieberman, who's the ECD, I'm like, "Hey, I'm just going to go back and move back, be closer to family," with no real reason.
You didn't have a job at the time?
Didn't have a job.
Wow.
So I packed up the family. If you would, here's the idiot. Here's the idiot in me. You would probably want to try to interview with a job in the West Coast in order for them to pay for your move.
Well, you might want to do that. Sure. Yeah.
I paid for my move. I paid for the darn U-Haul truck to sort of move my stuff back. I should have had a company, if I was smart, move me back to the West Coast, but I didn't. I just decided I was.
It helps to be there, though, doesn't it? Like, to go interviews, they're saying you're there already. I mean, being on the ground already there.
Right. Definitely. So the move was literally motivated by family and by just I think an intent to at some point make my way back. My kids just happened to be sort of transitioning from middle school to high school, and elementary to middle. So it was perfect time school wise to move them back. And I didn't want to put them in a program and end up pulling them out.
Right. No, I feel that.
So it was just sort of like there's no real good times. That was probably the best time.
Yeah.
So we moved back, and on the road trip, I shit you not, I was like, I never checked my LinkedIn. I checked my LinkedIn. There was like a cold email from the recruiter from Vans.
What?
And and I never checked my LinkedIn, and I looked at him like, oh, this is weird. Like, they want to interview me for an ECD title. And I've had a couple before.
This is from winning a can. You think? Seriously, like how did where's your name get on their radar?
Dan, here's what I asked. I said, hey, how did you find me? They're like, I Google searched you. I was like, what? You Google searched me? What did you Google search? What keywords?
Right. What was it? Did you find out?
I don't know. I mean, that's what they said. No. I don't know if it was like,
Blake and Drain?
Awarded creative director.
Blake and Drain.
White and Kennedy.
Listeners, have you seen this Blake and Drain spot? That killed me. That's still
one of my favorites.
Oh my god! All right, so you're driving across the country.
And I'm probably in Wyoming at this point, and I just like an idiot. Like I check in on my maybe like as I'm getting closer to the West Coast, I'm like, oh shit, I better find something, and so it provoked me to check my LinkedIn, and there's this email subject line, would love to talk to you about a potential role as an executive creative director, and I said, oh, this could be cool. But I promised myself that I was just going to freelance. And the hopes was really to just sort of freelance for a few very sort of admired creative directors and
see what happens.
And see what happens.
Yeah.
And then continue a relationship with White and Kennedy.
Sure, of course.
And do some global work.
Yeah.
And I went in for an interview, and it just, I don't know. It was one of those things where like, if I pass this one up, I'm, complete tool for doing that.
Why? What impressed you right away?
Because I never saw myself as a CD, and I took that and I liked it. I never saw myself as an ECD.
So you hadn't been a CD at Wyden. You were a senior art director.
I was a CD.
Okay.
At Wyden.
Okay.
But my sort of career projection, I never saw an opportunity
you never
for
had
myself.
Seniors. Okay, sorry. Okay.
As I never envisioned myself as an ECD. And for whatever reason, as a Filipino, I didn't know, like, it just, my head never went there. And I was completely happy just sort of being, like you said in the beginning of the podcast, just an art director.
Mm-hmm.
And I still am. Like, I would still love that sensation of like, like getting briefed, going back in and doing the work. I don't do that now because I don't think, for a lot of reasons, like I think the team should be responsible for that stuff. But that sensation of just like having a slate.
Are you okay giving up? So
what did I provoke a question?
No. Yeah, I'm wondering about that because you said like I want to do the work, but they've got to do it. Is it like, are you sort of like emotional about not having your hands on it sometimes?
No, not at all.
Okay,
not at all. I feel very sort of confident in my skills and what I've accomplished.
Yep.
And right now, my career is about really sort of putting other people up on that.
Listeners, I just want you to know. So Erwin's sitting in a chair. He's sitting back a little. His hands are kind of
covering my belly.
No, I wouldn't say. No, you're fit. You're fit, dude.
Oh, thank you.
He's got his hands wrapped, kind of laying on top of each other.
I want that soundbite alone. Sent to my
that soundbite that you're fit.
That I'm fit. Thank you, Dan.
Very comfortable. The body language is definitely exuding a comfort in this conversation. So this is not, in other words, this is not bullshit. What you're hearing is not bullshit.
Crazy. No. And I've been patted, patted on the back for being very relaxed and calm, and I've also been dinged for that. Like,
oh wow,
I've been being criticized for like being too laid back.
That's interesting.
So where's the balance? I feel like I have it now.
But you're at a place now where it's going to take you for what you are, and everything I've heard about
California vibes.
Whoa, that's cool.
Yeah.
And Steve Vibes. So what's the full name? Van Doren?
Steve Van Doren.
Yes.
Paul Van Doren's the founder. Paul and James were the founders.
So
that's where the name comes from.
I'm bothered by the Filipino comment.
You're bothered by it?
Yeah, I'm upset about the fact that someone might throttle their ambition because of their heritage.
Well, I would just say that I'm not bothered by it. I feel like based off what I saw ahead of me and my experiences, it just was it didn't seem like it was possible. And that's, I know it's I don't, this is going to go in a weird sort of like doomy conversation.
Do you feel like a role model now? Do you feel like somebody that's...
I would hope so, because there was a lot of kids after speaking today here at Creative Circus that came up to me, and a few of them, the minorities, I think
that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really,
and
really
so
cool.
I find that as a position now where I can inspire, and that's more important to me now than a headline. Sometimes.
That's really cool. So if I've been out of school for a year, 2 years, 10 years, what's the lure day-to-day of working in-house? Tell us what the upside of that is from your perspective, because you've had some great experience at both now.
Right. I mean, I think the inclusion of your voice matters, and you're not a vendor. You're not like a outside vendor. I think it's very apparent to me. I think the way that the team really feel like they have ownership of the voice and the look and the responsibility of continuing the success of the business, even from a revenue side, is important. And I think that is like when you feel that sort of ownership, you feel like you're a part of something.
Right, because as an outside vendor, you feel like you have to talk someone into something, or
you're trying to sell an idea from an outside perspective, which is completely considered a positive in my books too, in terms of like having an outside opinion to really sort of professionally guide a brand in a certain direction.
In a healthy relationship with an agency. An agency is going to tell them like it is.
Telling it like it is important.
Right, but I've also been in situations where the agency tells them what they want to hear because they're scared of losing the business. So
there's a lot of when I first started, there's you have to really be able to articulate your intent. Coming from such a highly creative, reputable agency like Wyden, people are thinking that, are you here to impose and win awards? Is our awards? I guess the question is, are awards important to you? And my answer to them is, to a point they are, but not if it's going to be at risk of the brand or the business. Right. Now, a lot of the brand when you're working for a company like an agency, for instance, that is those awards are important. Mm-hmm. That is the thing you're selling to a lot of clients, is the acumen. And how do you determine that? A lot of it is from the acknowledgments from awards. When you're working for the brand, you're working to help sort of keep people engaged and excited about the products that we're offering, and you want them sort of returning and feeling a deeper experience than just
very cool
than just a product that you're offering to them. And so that being said, like that mentality alone of like offering up a marketing perspective to a product, you're selling it without an intent to like, oh, this is going to be really provocative or risque, and this is going to win awards. No, that's in the end, you're just wanting further engagement from people to fall in love with your products and your offerings, your experiences.
Right. How involved are you? This is a weird question that might not even be worth keeping. So, how involved are you in the products? How much do you pay attention to the product? I mean, is the product the important thing? Does it serve, or does it just serve the ethos more? I mean, where does a product fit in your communications?
Right. It's funny enough. Paul Van Doren said it himself. Is like we are not a shoe company.
That's awesome.
We're a people company that happens to be wearing shoes. That happens to sell shoes. Sorry, I butchered that one.
See, you're done.
Yeah.
At that point, that's like the best thing you can hear.
Right. The shoes will always sort of speak for themselves. They will have a very distinct sort of like these sort of moments in culture where they're relevant, and the new products that we put out will continue to sort of grow that and evolve that sort of relevancy with culture. It's the experiences though that really are the things that people are going to hang on to, and allow people to be like, you know what, I don't necessarily like that product that Vans has out, but I do love what they stand for. And I think a lot of consumers of ours are really looking to us to sort of have a deeper connection to a philosophy in life and philosophy in art and culture, and that's what we aim to.
That's really
to give them.
shoes are designed by a different group. You have any say in any of the design?
Yeah, we're, marketing, creative, or second floor.
Yeah.
Footwear design and apparel design, third floor.
Okay.
We do a lot of creative vision exploration as we go into sort of new campaigns, and we work very closely with the footwear designers in that to make sure that we're sort of all sort of like firing and like have our creative vision sort of targeting towards a very specific either theme or piece of inspiration that comes off of consumer insights or...
You can tease elements back and forth too.
Yeah.
You can tease cultural elements up, and they can tease graphic elements down.
Yeah.
Does that happen?
Yeah, we have basically a creative council set up, and it's basically the VPs of the creative department. So my boss, Jamie Riley, who's the VP, he'll be part of there's three of them. There's the head of footwear. There's the sort of head designer from apparel, and they have a creative council. Now they'll determine sort of like a couple sort of inspiration or key talking points per season, and be like, hey, why don't you guys think about how to articulate what's happening in trend right now, and in art, and build sort of work that inspires around those
That's
types
cool.
of things.
Really, really cool.
Yeah, so it really sort of keeps us like sort of in right in step with each other.
Really cool. All right, that got a little granular, listeners. I'm going to ask a couple questions about you.
Yeah.
What personal trait of yours, what do you think it is about Erwin? What is it about you that you think has served you well or best so far in your career?
Right. Is it going to sound weird if I sort of have a canned answer for this one? Because I've thought about it before.
No one would have known it was canned if you just answered the damn thing.
I know, I put myself out there.
No, you're good. No.
What a jackass. He knows the answer. Well, I'll tell you what. There's traits about me that I think, if you're asking me to reflect, Dan, I will tell you this. Because it's always hard to really sort of say this without sounding like, oh, you're thinking about your traits.
I think it's really important and healthy to kind of reevaluate yourself. Right. Honestly. Right.
I would think, based off of performance reviews and feedback on myself, that the things that people, the traits that people identify that are working in my favor happens to be that sort of patience, the sort of mentorship, the ability to sort of help other teams sort of bring their voice up has always been good.
What does patience mean in that context?
There's Kobe Bryant, who has his sort of philosophy of like letting the game come to him. I've really sort of taken that philosophy on and applied it, and I was doing it before maybe he articulated it, and I continued now that I've identified it from Kobe of the like let the game come to you. Yeah. I don't push things. I just sort of let things happen.
Right, just drive across the country and check
just like the job.
Yeah, just check LinkedIn.
Yeah, the same thing comes with the work. Like I will continue to sort of like work and belabor concepts or layouts or design executions until like I feel like it's sort of come to me. Whether that's at 4 a.m. Session in Photoshop and the Adobe suite, or if it's sort of coming up with ideas and helping contribute ideas with my copywriting partner.
That's really great. Yeah, and I think there's also a sense of quality, caring about quality that you have too. I want the listeners to know that there was a point during this recording when Erwin had to cough, and he gave me a heads up so that I could cut it out. That was awesome, and very thoughtfully opened a water bottle that you guys never heard, because he's thoughtful about the fact that we're making something right now. Right. And that's really, really cool. It was great meeting you, man. Thanks so much for talking.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, listeners, you can check out Erwin Federizo on LinkedIn. There are links to his work on the Facebook page. You can reach me at danspodcast@mac.com. I'll be back with another conversation soon. Erwin, travel safely back home. Thank you again so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Listeners, see you in 2 weeks. See you. Bye. Exactly how it goes.
Oh, that was awesome.